Yeah, yes, ma'am. We're good to go. If you would like to call roll, thank you.
Senator Henry? Here. Representative Edmonds?
Here.
Here. Senator Barrow? Senator Cloud? Senator Harris? Senator Hingens?
Here.
Here. Senator Milligan for Senator McMath?
Here.
Here. Representative Bacala?
Here.
Here. Representative Miller? Representative Moore?
Here.
Here. Representative Presley? Representative Wheat?
Here.
Here. 7 members present.
Perfect, thank you, ma'am. Okay, folks, we're going to go in order. We're going to start off with a presentation by the Community Provider Association. If they want to come forward, introduce yourself. I know you all have, we've received several handouts, so just let us know which handout you're going to discuss and begin whenever you all get situated. Looks like we have a Jacqueline Blaney, Holly Johnson, and Tori Roca. If you all begin whatever order that you see fit. Oh, and obviously, Carol, did you fill one of these out?
I didn't.
You need to. I mean, not now, just you will be in a second.
Carolyn's going to start.
Okay.
Yes,
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. I'm Caroline Meehan. I am the Executive Director of the Community Provider Association. We are Louisiana's statewide advocacy association for disability service organizations. So I actually didn't give you a handout, but I think these ladies did. So I just want to thank, and just to go back, disability service organizations, when I say that, I'm talking about providers of home and community-based services. So these are Medicaid-funded home and community-based services for people with disabilities, both developmental disabilities and aging-related or adult-onset disabilities. Also, intermediate care facilities, or ICFs, and those are facilities, community homes, group homes, where individuals with developmental disabilities live together and receive services in the community, and also support coordination services, case management services for people who receive HCBS. So I really just want to start by thanking Chairman Henry, Vice Chairman Edmonds, and this committee for meeting on this topic, for continuing to show support for these services. I know y'all remember, I think we were on every agenda of this committee last year because the committee has just taken a great interest in funding disability services. And y'all played a major role in the successes we had in the 2022 legislative session, and that included Medicaid reimbursement rate increases for that full complement of disability services that I just described, HCBS, ICFs, and support coordination. And I speak on behalf of all the organizations in my association and across the state in saying we are truly grateful for those increases. They have allowed organizations to make critical investments in our workforce and in the direct care that we give to people with disabilities. So thank you so much. So the reason I wanted to come back before the committee today is just to kind of give you a sense of where we are with these services, because you've dedicated so much time to them, and then just let you know about some things on the horizon that we're going to need your help with at the legislature and also the Department of Health's help with. And so basically, just to give you a sense of where we are, in the 2022 legislative session, the legislature appropriated significant funds to increase reimbursement rates for home and community-based services, ICFs, and support coordination. The majority of these increases are being funded with what we would call one-time money. So that includes federal funds through the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and then just other sources of one-time funds that were found within the budget. So specifically, the increases for the aging-related adult onset waivers, that's fully being funded through the American Rescue Plan Act. For the disability, the DD waivers, the waivers within OCDD, that's being funded through the NOW fund, which is a dedicated fund within the budget. And for the ICFs, the group homes, community homes, that is just one-time money within the department's budget. So, and again, we're incredibly grateful for those increases. We pushed for them to happen this year. We knew they were being funded with one-time money. What we're asking for now is just your help as the legislature and the department's help in making a plan so we don't fall off a cliff in 2 to 3 years when the federal funds run out and when the state general fund budget constricts, which I think we all know it will, after this period we're in. And it's particularly important that these rate increases stay in place because, as I mentioned earlier, they're largely being used to fund wage increases and benefit increases and other direct care for individuals with disabilities. And those are requirements that the Department of Health put in place and that we support to be able to pay our employees more. But I'm sure y'all can understand we can't, in 2 to 3 years, if reimbursement rates are cut, we can't cut wages and benefits for staff and expect to retain them. So we just want to work with the legislature and with LDH to develop a plan that would transition these rate increases from the various sources of one-time money to state general fund and be annualized in the budget. So the first step, of course, is just going to be making sure these stay in the budget in next year's session for FY24, and then a longer-term plan to keep these increases in place once the money becomes a little tighter. So we just need to begin working on this now so we're not caught completely flat-footed in 2025, 2026. And we've started this conversation with LDH leadership, and they're aware of this issue, and we wanted to bring it to you today. So that's kind of just the lay of the land of where we are and why I'm here today representing providers. I know there are others who would like to speak on that, but I can take questions.
One question real quick. Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning.
Morning.
So just on the practical side, so we know the rates had increased, go back to about 2008, and now we got them up to what would have been today's rate this last session. On the practical side, have our providers received their funds as far as you know? Is there a common flow? I know there has to be some things happen after July. Are we caught up? Where are we on that?
Yes, I think by and large, the money has been received, definitely for the ICFs. There's one final payment the ICFs are waiting for this fiscal year, but they've gotten the 2 other increases that were in the budget. Same with the OCDD waivers, OAS waivers.
Yes, for the most. Introduce myself. Good morning, and thank you all for your attention. As Caroline said, we're really grateful for your help and support, and the folks who. I'm sorry.
Just for the record, could you state your name?
Your name.
Your name.
I'm so congested.
No worries.
My name is Jacqueline Blaney.
There we go.
And I'm good to be here. But I just wanted to comment on the Office of Aging supports that for the most part. The money has gotten to providers. There's a part of it that the department is still kind of working on, figuring how to make sure that it's gotten out in the appropriate way.
All right. Before you testify on anything else, I wanted to clarify one other thing, and then we can continue.
Sure. Thank you.
So we're good on the monies where they were. Now, through 2025, it looks like we're pretty stable, and then after that, then there has to be a plan in place that LDH would then recommend. So has there been any meetings so far with LDH on looking at what the propositions are going to be so that we can move forward? As a legislature, I think that's where we need to be today, and what we're here today is to find out, because obviously this was a great move of our colleagues to try to make certain that our ICFs and others were fully funded, something we've been working on for 8 years, I know, and we don't want that to go backwards. So where are we in response from LDH?
So we did have a preliminary meeting with LDH leadership in October to start talking about this, with the agreement to meet again in January to talk about what will be in this year's budget request to the legislature. I think the next step in that process is putting together some kind of group that brings together the different agencies within LDH who oversee our programs and stakeholders to put, I'd say, pen to paper and look at spreadsheets with the different, amounts of money we're looking at and really have a plan. So I think we've taken the first step. I think we need to, continue to really put something concrete in place.
Good. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Wheat, is this right? Representative Wheat's got a quick question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Listen, it seemed like I've seen something that I got from LDH about a comprehensive business plan that is being referenced. Caroline, have you seen anything from LDH as far as the preparation for that business plan concerning medical rate reimbursements? Has anything been put out from LDH?
So I have seen, so this was a component of the LDH FY22 business plan that said they would complete a comprehensive rate review for all Medicaid services and have a regular schedule of reviewing the adequacy of those rates. I've seen that they've finished that comprehensive rate review, but I haven't seen the actual schedule of the rate review.
So no anticipation as far as you know when that will be put forward?
No.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Well, maybe that's a question we could ask LDH.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. Are you finished with your?
I am, thank you.
Whoever would like to go next, please. Just
Good
introduce
morning,
yourself.
committee. Thank you for being here with us and giving us a chance to speak. My name is Holly Johnson. I also represent providers and the advocacy group. I'm also a parent of a child, so I'm various in all the stakeholder reports and things like that. One thing I would want to comment, Representative Edmond and Representative Wheat, in 2008, we actually took a 30% cut. So we have been playing catch up, in all these years. We have requested rate methodology, but the one thing that's been a big concern is all the things that have been put on the providers as far as unfunded mandates that have come along with us during those years. We have, transportation, insurance, supervisory staff. So we have actually, while we appreciate everything to move forward, we do need to be able to have a sustainable rate. During COVID, it has been extremely hard to keep staff, as you can imagine. With everyone, there's been a problem with keeping staff in businesses across the nation. But that being said, once we do not have these federal funds, we are going to still be in big jeopardy. Real quick, I do want to tell you a little bit about what all we do. Northwest State School was a big part of the community that I'm from, Northwest Louisiana, and we had actually 2 young men that were in Northwest State School. One gentleman of the 2 brothers, due to being unattended, actually had choked himself. He put toilet paper in his mouth. He was unattended. The other brother got out onto these now waiver services and did extremely well until he passed. Our success is huge with these individuals. These services are gravely, imperative for us to have. It makes more sense for money to go into these services. On House Bill 645, it was great that we had a win for our NOW services, but unfortunately, the elderly were left out of that passing. So we still have some things that we want to work on, and along with LDH, and of course with the support from you all, we want to be able to get to a point to where we are safe and not continually every year coming to see you to talk about these same issues. And most of you probably recognize my face. I've been here so many times. So it will be a win when I don't have to come visit you quite as much. But along this way, we're getting more and more mandates on us, Representative Edmond. So even though those wins are great, you know, while we're having more medical, more transportation, more things that LDH is demanding of us, we need to look at the overall big picture. So that's why we are here once again, is we need help to move forward to 2025. So that's, you know, we are moving forward, but we need something that will say, hey, you know, this is sustainable, here we are, and we're not going to be juggling around in another year. It creates a great hardship on the overall service.
Gotcha.
So I'm going to pass it over if you don't have any questions.
No, ma'am. Board's clear.
Okay. I'm going to give it to Jackie.
Good morning again, and my name is Jackie Blaney. I'm the Director of Independent Living here in Baton Rouge and the coordinator of the Louisiana Supported Living Network. We're a network of in-home support providers with members from Shreveport to New Orleans. In the interest of time, I have prepared an information sheet which you all have for your review. I would like to highlight a few areas that might not be self-explanatory on the sheet. I'm going to focus today on LDH's Office of Aging and Adult Services in-home supports to persons experiencing adult onset disabilities, including older adults. Sometimes I think, you know, we live and breathe in these services and we know it so well that I think from time to time to take an opportunity to share, you know, exactly what the services are and which department, and that might be helpful to you guys. So I want to take a little minute to do that. We are licensed by the Department of Health to provide support to maintain optimum health, safety, and well-being. That's what our charge is, and that's our mission. You'll find this in the CMS and LDH regulatory documents. This refers to increasing and maintaining overall quality of life, including supporting the persons with their living environment, with meaningful relationships, with their spirituality, security, engagement in activities of their interest. As you can tell, home and community-based services strives to provide a holistic approach that is best practice, and research has shown increases physical and mental health, as well as lowering cardiovascular disease, stroke, and other health concerns. In addition to providing support to avoid unnecessary hospital and ER visits. The implementation of these supports requires trained and competent internal support managers that support participants with information, advice, and assistance in many areas of life, from how to handle difficult personal situations to how to handle declared emergencies. This management level includes many of the unsung heroes of this ongoing COVID pandemic. And of course, trained and competent direct support staff are essential to these quality outcomes. We are all aware of the increase in cost of living that provider rates have not kept up with this cost. Our members are dedicated and committed to serving people. However, we cannot do it alone. We need your help, as been stated, to develop and maintain equitable and sustainable system that provides reliable and adequate in-home support provider rates. We need your continued support to ensure funding that is rooted in best practice, saves lives, and is what our citizens want and deserve. Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. The board is clear. It looks like we have at least two more people that would like to speak. Catherine Dwyer and Andrew. If you all would step aside, let them take a seat. Thank you. Mr. Dwyer, if you'd like to start.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman Henry, and thank you, committee. I appreciate you letting me speak. I mostly came to listen, but as Carolyn and the other ladies from the Provider Association were speaking, I felt it was necessary for me to report from my perspective. First and foremost, I'm the mother of my daughter Jennifer, who is 45 years old, born with multiple disabilities. She tends to be amusing. But I'm also chair of OCG's State Advisory Committee, and I'm on the Jefferson Parish Regional Advisory Committee for Developmental Disabilities. I worked for the Human Development Center for 25 years. I'm retired from there, which is the state's developmental center in disabilities, and I worked for Families Helping Families and the Autism Society of Greater New Orleans, so I have vast experience from both a parent and providing support to families. I can say personally that I am concerned about what is going to happen when federal funds do run out. I'm very grateful for the wage rate y'all provided for support coordinators, support workers, early steps. I'm very grateful for the funds, even for the comprehensive dental that I helped advocate for. But what I'm concerned about is who's going to help me take care of Jen as I get older. I just had my 68th birthday, and I'm starting to have some aging issues. And right now, Jen's day hab is closed. It's been closed since the pandemic. They've been trying to open. They were ready to open, and then Ida came. They had significant damage. They finally got all that damage repaired, and now they can't find enough workers. They're saying they're barely finding enough workers for their group homes. We also can't find support with the home and community-based waiver for the in-home care. Right now, a supervisor is coming to help just to bathe with Jen because I had some serious back issues that I needed help with, but that's the most that can be provided. So it really concerns me as we're aging, and when I look at it, even with the rate increase, I wonder, if we need to do more, and I'm pretty sure we do. The national average is $14 an hour for direct support workers. During the pandemic, we lost thousands of workers dying from COVID. We also lost quite a few who retired. It's the baby boomer generation, so a lot of people are retiring now. And then now with businesses holding on to that virtual option to work and their higher pay, the jobs are even more competitive than they were in the past. So I'm hoping that we can just make sure we protect what we have for sure in the future. I loved when one year you put in HB1 in the preamble, or I think that's what it's called, I'm not sure, that cuts would not be made to developmental disability services when there is a tight budget year. I hope you do the same also for the elderly. These are our most vulnerable citizens. When you start cutting those programs, that's when you start seeing people getting less quality care or no care at all, and puts their lives at risk. And that's all I really have to say. I just really support and appreciate everything you've done for us, and I'm happy to help in any way I can with information.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. The board is clear. Andrew?
Thank you. Andrew Mull, AARP Louisiana. Thank you. I won't repeat comments that have already been shared, but first I really do want to echo the thanks that's already been given to the Medicaid Oversight Committee for raising the visibility of this issue last year. We find that it's an incredibly crucial issue to providing care. And I'd also like to thank the previous speakers for really spotlighting the discrepancy that existed between the aging providers and the disability providers. Aging providers are providing the same level of care as the developmental disability provider community and deserve the same rate of payment. The woman referenced House Bill 645 that was brought forward to the legislature last year. It was introduced by Speaker Pro Tem McGee and had several of you on it as sponsors. This bill would have created a trust fund called the Community Options Trust Fund, which would have really helped seniors who live in their own homes and help more receive care in their communities. And it was really modeled after the Now Waiver Opportunity Fund that was created in 2007. And simply what that fund does is it takes a small percentage of excess revenue in a budget year and puts it into a fund that can be used for increasing provider rates and more slots for services. The fund, it depends year to year how much the fund might draw. Some years it won't be anything, but some years it might just be a little bit of money that can go towards providing some additional funds for care. So we're going to be bringing that bill again in 2023, and we hope that members of this committee will support it. And if passed, it'll help more seniors provide more services and hopefully create a more balanced provider rate structure. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
One question, Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Less a question. I just think it's, as we go forward, kind of look back on how we got where we are. And quite frankly, you know, we're legislators. We're not the smartest people in the world, but we listen pretty well. And the first round of increases came about, and you mentioned this, Andrew, you know, meetings like this with this group and with appropriations and with personal phone calls. We became aware of the problem with the developmentally disabled population and the issues with the quality of care, you know, the quality of the person giving the care, their lack of knowledge often, the high turnover rates, a lack of resources, a lack of, I mean, just people were begging for services, and often the service they received was substandard. We didn't know that till somebody told us that. And once we delved into it as a committee, so I credit everybody here, once we really looked into it, we agreed, and that was the developmental disabilities increase, the rate increase, because we recognized the problem. Same thing happened last year with elderly service. We don't know there's a problem till somebody tells us there's a problem. So I think it's important that, you know, the legislature has meetings that are open to the public so that we can learn from you guys about where the shortfalls are, so that we can try to address those. So I just wanted to look back on that history and let you know how we got here. And your successes in the future are going to largely depend on the information that you're able to share and the compelling stories that you're able to tell at committees like this. And you have to make a case, all right, for the need, because the budget is all about competing interest. Everybody wants the dollars, and you know they're finite. There's only so many dollars, and you try to spread them around where they most need to go. So not a question, just a comment. We got that increase because you proved you needed it, and now you're going to need to go back, I think, and continue to push the buttons. And make sure that you're not forgotten. So that's it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gotcha. Okay, the board is clear. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you all for coming. This is kind of this is the first time that someone's actually been proactive in saying in the future, not like next year, but looking forward, saying in 2024, 2025, we expect shortfalls, so that when we're preparing the budget, not only this year but moving forward, we can ideally anticipate and start building towards it now. So it's very helpful. So thank you all very much for coming. Next on the agenda is I believe Ms. Smith. Presentation regarding abuse and neglect of individuals with disabilities. And for the record, on the last one, there was a Tori Roca who is present and would provide information if needed. All right. Ms. Smith, if you would like to come forward, and Mr. Young. Yes, ma'am, if you can introduce yourself and begin whenever you're ready.
My name is Kim Smith, And yes, I'm here to talk about abuse and neglect and exploitation of people with disabilities. This is not my first testimony before this committee. I came last year, June 25th. So much has happened. I hope I can make it through this testimony without breaking down.
Just take your time.
I brought 2 pictures of my brother, Brett. Well, first, let me just tell you, I'm the mother of a child with a disability. This is BJ right here. He had a brain injury in an accident in 2005. So he is a now waiver client. He receives 24/7 care. My brother, Brett, was also a brain injury survivor from traumatic birth. He also needed 24/7 care. I kind of feel guilty being here when I listen to the issues about funding and the fall off of employees, you know, companies not being able to find caregivers and retain staff. I get all of that. But this is, and we're grateful for the waiver. Thank God, because if I died tomorrow, somebody's going to take care of my son. But this is how I see the waiver, the now waiver. It's like a big, beautiful cake, and everybody wants a piece of it, right? But when you get a piece of it and you take a bite, there's a lot of rot in there. And it infuriates me because there's a lot of issues that are not addressed. Abuse and neglect of people with disabilities. Let me get my notes. I wanted to say also my dad is here to support. He didn't want to talk, and that's okay. He is a veteran. He was a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne. And let me just say this before I get into the story about my brother. My dad was sent to the Dominican Republic in 1965 by President Lyndon Johnson, along with 22,000 troops. And that was to quell what they thought was a communist takeover, okay? There were about 500 to 600 Americans there at that time. And I think my dad was sent over there to protect Americans. Okay, Dad, where were you? Right in the back. And he comes home, and in 2021, his son dies with no protection. None. Couldn't stop his death. My point is, we send our troops overseas, we send billions of dollars, and people here at home are dying, like my brother, and he's not the only one. This is a systemic problem. It's nationwide. It's not special to Louisiana. But this is where we live. This is where the catastrophe is happening for us and people, other families like us. My son and I do brain injury awareness. We do public speaking. We do a yearly conference. We go to LSU. We go to schools, and we talk about brain injury awareness and prevention. We also advance art as medicine for healing trauma. Very powerful, no side effects. I want to tell you what happened. I came here June 25th of 2021 to talk about abuse and neglect, 46 days after I sat before this committee. My brother Brett died, a horrible, painful death as a result of neglect under the care of a provider. Our family has been devastated. Why did this happen? I don't know. Because the provider was warned of the risk that killed him. How do I know that? Because I made the call. I'm the one who informed them of the risk. And you know what they did? They decided to ignore it. They point blank told me, we're not doing anything about it. And so my brother is eating 6 feet of dirt, and our family is in severe mourning for the rest of our lives. My brother, I wish you could see his pictures, like the audience can see. A beautiful human being. One of the things about his brain injury is that it prohibited him from seeing any danger or ugliness in the world. He had a beautiful soul. Everybody was his friend. Everything was sunshine and roses all the time. He's gone. At the end of his life, he had some really severe mental health issues. And Representative Bacala and Chairman Edmonds, y'all were very, very gracious to me, letting me speak for a long time. And I want to let you know, when OCDD came up and they were questioned, they promised some things, especially to get back to me, so that to try and get some issues solved for my brother. Not one phone call and not one email happened. There's no reason for that. But this illustrates exactly what's going on in this industry. I want to give some statistics about abuse and neglect, and this is nationwide. So if anybody, sometimes whenever I complain about abuse and neglect, I kind of get a little feeling like maybe people think that I am exaggerating. Trust me, The statistics are nauseating. But I'm going to tell you first, I've been following the situation with the Department of Children and Family Services for these toddlers that have met untimely death. Last week on WAFB, Governor Edwards described DCFS handling of one of its cases as absolute failure. And as I read all these articles, I realized the parallels between what's going on with DCFS and what's going on with our disability community, it's identical. There's a problem here. I'm not sure what the solution is. There is absolute failure in our state offices. They are failing people with disabilities like my son and my brother. My son almost died twice. I'm not even going to get into it because I had, what, a 30-minute run in my mouth last year. I'm not going to repeat all of it. You can go and watch it. Abuse and neglect of people with disabilities is an unacknowledged crisis. Crime, abuse, and neglect frequently goes unrecognized and underreported. Abuse, neglect, and exploitation are constant dangers for people with disabilities. They are 4 to 10 times more likely to be abused as compared to the general population. That is frightening. According to the Department of Justice in 2019, they found that the rate of violent victimization against people with disabilities was nearly 4 times the rate of persons without disabilities. Nobody's listening, nobody's watching. An ABC News story in 2021 said that crimes against people with disabilities and victimization rates are rising since 2015. Why is that? It's a societal issue. I will admit that. People with disabilities are abused more frequently and for longer periods of time. They are less likely to access the justice system and more likely to be abused by someone that they know. I could sob on this. It makes me sick. Provider companies are complicit in this. And let me just tell you something. I'm sure maybe some of y'all are aware of this. Hey, Rhonda. If anybody doubts for 1 second the trouble that we are in Louisiana, I couldn't believe this when I saw it. The Office of Inspector General investigated the state of Louisiana on incident reporting. They were found in violation of federal and state requirements. I'm shaking inside because I'm so angry. What is an incident report? What is a critical incident report? It's anything having to do with abuse, neglect, exploitation, rights violations, serious injury, missing persons, death, suicide attempts, medical emergencies, restraints, medical errors, and law enforcement contact. So I'm reading through this. And this is a matter of public record. So if anybody wants to know and read the details, you can absolutely do that. Why am I bringing this up? Because if critical incidents are not being done in a timely fashion and they're not being followed up on, I can assure you that there's a whole ton of stuff that's going on that's never being reported. Between my son and my brother, they have been through too many providers to count. We're fixing to go into self-direction, which is a wonderful program that's going to give my son more independence and more control over his life, and it's going to completely remove the provider company. Thank the good Lord Jesus for that. They are complicit in what goes on. I cannot even begin to tell y'all the lies and cover-ups. I said this in my last testimony. There is a solidarity that exists in these companies. They will not tell on one another. They will lie. They will keep secrets. They will lie to the state. It's unbelievable. One of the things I talked about, and I'm not going to get into it in detail because I did it last time, the retaliation that was taken out on me is unforgivable. It's unethical. And the people that did it, zero consequences. Why? Because I'm doing what I'm doing today, and they don't want to be on the hot seat. Well, if you're not protecting the clients that you serve, that you are supposed to ensure their health and safety, then you need to be on the hot seat. And I don't mind doing it. I had to answer to the frickin' Attorney General's office. Unbelievably humiliating. And they found absolutely nothing that I could be prosecuted for. And don't you think for 1 second the people that did that to me didn't know that. They knew. They've been working in this industry for 30 years. I know who did it. It's ridiculous.
Are you good for a question?
I am. I'm sorry.
No, Representative Bacala.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. And you and I have talked often about some of this, but I think you can't figure out how to fix things until you start blocking them, identifying the source. And when we talk about the legislative process and the executive department, and we're talking about private providers, in other words, a business, the people who provide services for you are a business, right? And they're not employed by the state, but they're paid, reimbursed by the state for services through the Medicaid program or the various waivers. So I think at this table, we often, and you and I talked about the quality and the things we talked about earlier, the fact that the high turnover, the low quality of service, et cetera, what could we do about it? And our actions were, let's increase the pay so perhaps we can start reversing that trend. I think everybody right now in the world is suffering with the trend of nobody wants to work. You can't find employees to do anything. You cited DCFS. I think every story says they're 400 people short, 175, that they can't find. They can't hire enough people, not enough applicants that meet the requirement. Obviously DCFS is in this with us as the oversight agency, but they basically are paying the bills to the providers, and I know we've talked about how do we start improving those provider services. I just want to make sure that as we have this committee and everything you say is vitally important to discuss, that we talk about the quality of providers, and certainly the state has some oversight of those sorts of things, but trying to compartmentalize where the issues are and where they aren't is something that we need to make sure that we're not punching everybody because you're mad at one person in the room. I think it's just I just want to make that point that, and I'm glad to see you guys are going in the self-directed side, and that'll give you more control. You don't like somebody, you fire them, you hire somebody else, which maybe is the way we need to go with all this. I don't know. So again, just a comment, if you'd like to respond, I would appreciate it, because people like you are why we come here.
I am sorry that 100 other dissatisfied families are not here today. I have talked to a lot of families and a lot of clients. It is a systemic issue. I recall Julie Foster Hagan being called up and questioned after my testimony, and she basically said, no, it's not a systemic problem, which left me hanging out in the cold looking like I was some crazy mom with all of this. My brother's death, I hate to say it, is confirmation of every single thing I said in that meeting last year. I agree that there needs to be higher wages, but one of the things that I really drilled down on was training. I go through the same training as every other DSW in this industry. The training is abysmal. A lot of these people, listen, I'm not making fun of caregivers. They shouldn't be taking care of a goldfish, much less a human being that has complex medical needs that you need to understand what you're doing. A lot of these people come to work, they sit on their phones all day, they got to go get their kids, they're arguing with their boyfriend, and if you call and you complain to the provider, well, they're so short on staff, they don't want to hear from people like me, they want me to go away. As long as there's a warm body in that chair, that's all they care about. And I understand the financial aspect of it, and I understand what you're saying about, compartmentalizing and trying to figure out where the issue is. It's difficult to unpack. I'll be really honest with you.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that the idea of going self-directed for you is going to be the best thing. Because if you get somebody who's on their phone all day, you can fire them and find somebody else.
He can fire me too if he wants to. It's not an issue.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things I came across was House Bill 251, which was passed last year sometime. Thank God it came across my Facebook page. It is a bill that basically deals with statute of limitations on prosecuting people who commit crimes against the infirm, which is people with disabilities. The statute was written by Assistant Attorney General Michelle Thompson, who I was very lucky to speak with on several occasions, and we had a nice conversation about why that bill came forth. And basically, this is the meat of it. She said by the time families were finding out that their loved ones were being abused or neglected, it was too late. Our hands were tied. We couldn't do anything. That is the most that I have ever seen being done to advocate for people with disabilities anywhere in this state. OCDD, Louisiana Department of Health, Governor's Office of Disability Affairs, nothing, zero, zero, zero. Disability Rights of Louisiana, I went and looked at their mission statement. As far as I can see, They're not doing anything to help people on home and community-based services. I'm glad for the work that they do, but more needs to be done. I wanted to touch base on, I told you about my brother's death, but this past spring, I want to bring to your attention Kyle Petrus, a young man who lived in an institution in Boyce, Louisiana, was found in a state of having been atrociously abused. I saw the photos, and I got to tell you, this young man was beaten black and blue. He had chunks of his flesh removed. His elbow was hanging out. Listen, this is unbelievable what's going on. He's not the only one. I also saw pictures of other residents in that institution. Why do I believe that? Because my brother, when he lived in Ruston State School for 20 years, was horribly abused, and we didn't know it at the time until he came home and he started talking about it. My family didn't suspect, like most families. I don't know where his case stands, but I believe he was absolutely removed from that institution. And I hope everyone else that was found, look, that place needs to be investigated inside and out. I want to tell you about another death. A 46-year-old man named Ron Brinker. This breaks my heart more than anything. An autistic man that was beaten to death by his night caregiver of 3 years. He lived in Terrytown, Louisiana, around New Orleans. Instead of calling 911, the murderer caregiver called his mother, who was the manager of the provider company, and she helped to cover the crime. The caregiver murderer was convicted this year, thank God, and I spoke to his family about exactly what happened. It's disgusting what's going on. His sister told me that a life insurance policy had been taken out on her brother, and guess who the beneficiary was? None other than the murderer. This is unbelievable. She told me about some of the testimony that was given during her brother's trial. Blew my mind. Y'all think that this is a one-off? People like my brother and Ron Brinker and poor Kyle Petrus being abused, it's not a one-off. I promise you, abuse and neglect is so well hidden, it's unbelievable. I don't know what to do about it. It's a societal issue.
Can you take one more question?
Please.
Representative Edmonds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to go back to the, you referred to I think you said Inspector General's report. Mm-hmm. Do you have a date on that report?
I do. It says May 2021. And if you would like this, if somebody wants to review this, I'll be happy to give you this copy.
Just tell me the title of the that you should on your cover page of what this...
Louisiana did not fully comply with federal and state requirements for reporting and monitoring critical incidents involving Medicaid beneficiaries with developmental disabilities.
All right.
What we'll do is we'll just I'll ask our staff to get a copy of that
Sure.
and email it to all the members. So you can just keep that
Absolutely.
right there. Well, they can find it, and we'll get all the members, either the ones that are present and the ones that aren't here, we'll
Okay.
all get a review of that.
On these cases of abuse, obviously these are dealt with somewhere in the justice system. You're making reference to particular people. And all of these cases have been found, are concluded at this time, the ones that you are giving us reference to today?
The Ron Brinker, the autistic man from Terrytown, that case has concluded, and his murderer was convicted, I believe, in the spring of this year.
Okay.
Kyle Petrus, as far as I know, that is still under investigation, because from what I understand, and I was sent a whole lot of information, I couldn't even repeat it to this committee. It's unbelievable what goes on in institutions. As far as I know, that's still under investigation. And I do want to let you know that my son and I went this year earlier and spoke to the Attorney General's office. We met with a special agent and one of the assistant attorney generals, and they listened and they were very kind. And they agreed that every single thing we were saying, weren't surprised by it at all.
Yeah, obviously it doesn't solve the provider problem that you're referring to, but obviously the justice system did carry out and, according to your opinion, found the proper decision that the person that was victimized, that the court, in essence, found them guilty of whatever they had done.
Yes.
But that still doesn't solve necessarily the provider issue. Now, just to be clear, you can't speak for every provider, but have you made, I remember you coming to testify, but I don't remember, did you give us a list on a personal level of providers that you had experience with that either had abused or that caused you abuse in your family? Did you make us aware of those providers?
I did not. I was really afraid to, because there was absolutely nothing.
We can't require that of you, obviously, but we can't do. We're an oversight committee, and the only thing we can do is to look into what we get from wherever that is, whether it's from a person, a provider, an agency of the state. So if you're willing, you can give us information. If you're not, then we're not available. I can't find it just by looking it up. I can't just find every issue with. We're in favor of helping any of our residents that are abused in any area, regardless of what it is, disability being one of them. I speak for anybody on this committee. I know where we are. We don't want any of our constituents to be harmed in any fashion, but we have to have some kind of information in order to do this. I don't know that there's, Mr. Chairman, I don't know that today's the proper day, but I think obviously that whether it's LDH or someone, we did bring LDH to the table the last go, and if we would like, obviously these are broad brush type of elements for you guys to come back and respond to. We can do that at a later date if you feel more prepared, or if there's somebody here today, if they want to come, they could come today. I don't know what your favor is.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we get the report that you're looking at, let everybody read that, and either the next meeting, the next time we have one of these meetings, we can use that as a reference point. So where when LDH comes up, we can get a more substantive answer, because we'll say, look, this is the report we're going to use. We need a response to that. And it gives us kind of a target. And
this also has an answer by Dr. Courtney Phillips of Louisiana Department of Health. I don't have it, but she did answer this investigation.
And we'll use that kind of the focal point for the next time we meet, if that's acceptable to everybody. I think that's fair to do to LDH as well, just so everybody can be prepared.
I'd also want to say something about justice.
Oh, you have one more question before. Are you finished?
Oh, no.
No, I just want to, I think, Mr. Chairman, obviously that's the way we have to proceed, is methodically to try to build our report of what it is we're looking into for our constituents.
Of course.
So the more you can help us with that and send it to us, the more that we can respond, and then we'll get an agenda item and we will carry forward.
I just want to make one more comment, and I'm more than happy to give y'all anything you need.
That's it. That's it.
Talking about justice. People with disabilities getting justice. I just want to give one example, and then I'm done. My son, a few years ago, I got a phone call from a provider to go to Lafayette General. My son was hospitalized. He was in bad shape. Coming to find out, he had been given some drugs by one of his caregivers. She wasn't going to admit that she did it. So what I did was, he called her and asked her for some more drugs, and I filmed it. I brought it to my local sheriff's department, and they wanted to arrest her immediately. When the state came in to do an investigation, you know what happened? He went and got the recording from the sheriff's office, and the claim was unsubstantiated, even with a recording of this DSW making a drug deal with my son. Why was it unsubstantiated? Because supposedly the investigator couldn't understand the recording. You know what I said? Well, the sheriff and the head of narcotics could sure understand that recording. Do you see where we're at? That doesn't make any sense. Let me tell you something. Adult protection, just like child protection, it is the same exact thing going on. I'm sorry, we have people that don't give a damn. I'm not saying I haven't met any good people, but it's about this big. Most of those people are there for a paycheck, and that's it. That's it.
Can you get one more question before you go?
Sure, sorry.
Senator Milligan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't sit on this committee full time. Thank you so much for your work and your effort, and sorry for your loss. This may be in the report that we're going to get a copy of, but for me, being new to this this issue, what's the chain of authority in this? When you start with the patient and you go to the provider, who's over the provider? Tell me what that chain of authority looks like, that chain of supervision looks like.
Okay. Of course, if any incident occurs, a report has to be written within, I believe, 24 hours, and it has to be submitted to the state.
To who?
The provider has to submit it to, I'm drawing a blank here. It's, Adult protection, I think,
Okay.
or health standards.
Is there what's the method for doing so? Is there a hotline, a 1-800 number?
Well, when an incident occurs, as a mother and a caregiver, I can call the adult protection and make a complaint myself, but the provider overall is obligated to make that report as
Okay.
well.
And so the report that you mentioned from the Inspector General's investigation, when a report gets to adult protection, is that where the breakdown first occurs, according to the Attorney General's?
No, I
Inspector
think what's
General's
happening is it's happening at the provider agency level,
Okay.
where they're not reporting on time because there's a time limit, there's a restriction, and then there's also a follow-up. So after the critical incident is written, there is a follow-up where they have to state what happened, what was the outcome, and what actions did they take, right? And some of that was not even being done.
Okay. I'm just trying to identify where the breakdowns occurs. It seems like if, you as a mother of a patient identifies an issue, makes a report, files a report, requests a report, it goes to an agency and they have to follow up. And then if the Inspector General's report comes out and says that there's a breakdown at whatever level, that's where it's got to be addressed first.
It's with providers.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, the board is clear, and I would, once we get the report, we'll have another meeting once,
Okay.
and I would, I appreciate
Thank
your
y'all for
time, and I recommend you keep coming until you get what you want.
Will do. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, presentation on local pharmacies. Oh, I'm sorry, I got a hand wave. Did you want to? Hold on one second. We might have missed a card. It doesn't matter. Just come on down. We'll have to hold off on local pharmacies real quick. Oh, there it is. We're good. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Kathy Dwyer again. I've spoken to Kim and other families several times. And as chair of the State Advisory Committee, I've been trying to go over some of the issues, and I made a bunch of notes as Kim was talking that might be helpful. If I'm not mistaken, and Kim, please correct me if I'm wrong, her brother died because there was not an aide to assist him while he began choking when he was on a van. He started eating food, which he wasn't supposed to do, but if there was an aide besides the driver, it could have been prevented. And so some consideration needs to be about funding to make sure when they are transporting individuals with disabilities on vans to various events, the driver can't stop and help with an emergency. So there probably needs to be an attendant, which would mean there needs to be pay for that attendant to be on the van. Okay, just a minute, Jen. Also, there's at the regional level, we discussed providers too and questioned the not just the application process, but the qualification process. So I think a review of what those qualifications are would be necessary. It was told to me that just about anybody can apply with no real qualifications in the developmental disabilities field. So I think that might need to be looked into. We've had adult protection services come and present. We were supposed to have child protection, but they couldn't make it at our SAC meeting, but we're going to go through all of it. In looking over it, there's several different reporting agencies. First, there's child protection, obviously for children. Then there's adult protection up to a certain age, and then there's the elderly. It's a very confusing system for families to know who to call. And it seems to me that whole system needs to be reviewed, possibly even merged together. You know, if there's a shortage of staff, there might be some staff in one division that could help with the other, and so on and so forth. Let's see. When I had made 2 reports regarding my daughter to Adult Protective Services, and actually it wasn't me. Yes. The process is, at least on the waiver, when there's a critical incident, you know, we report it to the provider, but we have a support coordinator too that's also supposed to complete the critical incident report. When I reported 2 incidents for my daughter, not once did I hear from Adult Protection Services. Didn't call me to ask me what happened, and I didn't receive a report. So there's definitely a failure there. If they don't bother to call me to find out what happened, how are they going to be able to investigate and prevent it from happening again? Definitely training. I've been talking about training at our state advisory committee, but not only training, but I think there needs to be some kind of certification and a career ladder. I think it would be helpful for them to look into that. Someone mentioned self-direction might be the way to go for everyone. Not necessarily. As we get older, we may not be able to manage that, so we still are going to need providers at some point, or you're going to have adults with developmental disabilities who cannot manage their own hiring and so forth, so there's still going to need to be providers and support coordinators. But self-direction is a wonderful program, and you know, and a lot of families like it. I was getting ready to move to it, but there was a problem back then, and I haven't looked at it seriously enough to go to it. But talking about, Kim mentioned Kyle Petrus. I've had communications with his mother. What happened to Kyle was not the first time. This is the second time Kyle sustained injuries at the same institution. It's a residential facility. The mother was even responsible in passing laws way back after the first incident. What happened to Kyle was, we don't know how he sustained the injuries, but he had broken elbows and they weren't attended to properly, that they got infected, so the bone was actually showing. So there was some neglect of just medical care, I mean basic medical care, that should not have gone that long for him to have to go to the ER, and he was in the ICU, I want to say for 3 months. That's how bad off he was. Then he had to go to a rehab facility, and that's when I had contact with his mother, because there was a problem with, you know, she has to also start picking out a new place because she's not sending him back to that same facility, obviously. But the rehab couldn't take it until she received this, and they couldn't take it until she received that, and I finally put her in touch with Julie Foster Hagen and some others to help. But I was alerting Health Standards and Julie Foster Hagen when this whole thing about Kyle came into being, and I was sending pictures of him, and I have screenshots of a lot of comments that were made on Facebook when this was being shared on Facebook by current and past employees about a major problem. So it's not just workers, it's supervisors who either just overlook this or aren't aware. I'm not sure what the problem is. I can only say by hearsay. But there are reports of, and alleged reports, I will say, of them holding individuals underwater while bathing them in order to get them to comply. There are reports of punching individuals in private areas in order to get them to comply. I think we might have some mothers that will say they noticed some bruises on their sons, you know, that could be from that kind of activity. So there was a person that was just fired from this facility for something minor because he was trying to get the attention of the problems there, and they ended up firing him for something else. And he says they just didn't want to hear about the problems. So I think it goes higher up, and that needs to be addressed. And I'm not saying that's every facility. You know, my daughter attended Magnolia Day program, and while there's some minor incidents, there was nothing abusive that I've ever, physically abusive anyway, that I've ever seen. I think there's some people who don't understand the mindset that you need to treat my daughter and her peers like you would treat yourself. You know, you don't treat them like animals. You know, you don't treat them like third-class citizens. So that's some of the problems that I've seen. But for the most part, I would say Kim was on target. It is a big problem, and it's also in education. We had an experience with my daughter when she was in elementary school that I had to take her to the ER. But again, those with disabilities are more likely to be abused because of their vulnerability. They are 7 times more likely to be sexually assaulted than the average person. And that's how bad it is. But I wanted to bring these suggestions to you because I think there needs to be a complete review of the reporting system, and maybe even, like I said, merge the investigative agencies so that, you know, there are appropriate staff and so forth to investigate this. So.
Okay, the board is clear. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Denise Young. I have a son named Seth Marceau. Seth has autism and he's nonverbal. He resided at this place that Kyle Petrus was at.
What is the name of that place, if you don't mind?
St. Mary's Residential Training Academy in Boyce, Louisiana, in Rapides Parish.
Okay, thank you.
Seth resided there from 2016 to 2019. He was neglected and abused. I had no actions have ever been taken for this. I'm nervous.
Take your time.
For my son and for others, my son is no longer at this facility, but I do speak for
But other kids still are, correct? Other people are, right?
210 people there. The ages are from 6 to whatever age. And it is state funded, and it's also run as well by the Diocese of Rapides Parish,
okay,
Catholic Church. I have contacted the Alexandria Police, Rapides Sheriff, Child Protection Services, because at the time Seth was under 21. He's now 21. The St. Cabrini Hospital, we spent many weekends there at the St. Cabrini Hospital. STARS is it's a sexual abuse team. Actually, the lady that was speaking, my child had bruises in his growing. St. Mary's never told me, never reported anything. It came from an employee that worked there, that when clients, I call clients people, would not do as they ask. I mean, these people have autism. They were kicked and beaten in the province. I've contacted, so over the past 6 years, I have contacted people. I have emailed representatives, the Attorney General, the Governor of Louisiana, the Advocacy Center of Louisiana, Louisiana Department of Health, and Health Standards, and nothing, and no one's been held accountable.
Did you file like reports, like written reports anywhere? I'm just asking. I'm trying
I
to
did with these places, and the Advocacy Center, which really just broke my heart, said they just couldn't do anything to help me. And my point is, why do you even have a job? You know, right now, so in March of 2022 is what happened to Kyle Petrus. Kyle Petrus and my son, at the time that Seth was residing there, were in the same dorm. And so I had brought my attention to the Attorney General's office, and I had sent them a bonder. I have over 100 photos of abuse and neglect of Seth. I have the reports. I have the reports from the hospital. And I got a phone call from a lady named Megan that worked with the Attorney General, and she told me via phone that my case wasn't important enough. And when I hung up, I got another call from the investigator for Attorney General John Rogers, and he said, your case is very important. And it's when I told him about Kyle Petrus. And Kyle Petrus was tied to a bed, starved. He had lost 20 pounds in a week. He was beaten. It's unbelievable. I have the photos on my phone. It is unbelievable. He is nonverbal as well. He's a little bit older than Seth. And I know the mom, Angela, only knew about her son in that state because in that state of being abused, because the hospital had contacted her to talk about to amputate her son's arm because of the you could see the bone of the elbow. St. Mary's never reported it, nothing. So right now there is an ongoing investigation with the Attorney General's office for Kyle and for Seth, but it's been 8 months and we've heard of nothing.
Gotcha.
It's terrible. It's just, and I don't understand. There's laws in place to protect people with disabilities, but why aren't they being enforced? And why aren't they being enforced to help people? Like, I know it happens everywhere, but like St. Mary's in a facility, why are these people just getting away with it? Now, from March through August of this year, 6 people have died at this place already. So this is a problem.
Yeah. Oh.
This is a big problem.
Do you mind if I share your information? Like,
I don't mind.
gotcha. No, not to the public. Representative Edmonds, excuse me.
Good morning. Thank you for coming. Now, I want to make certain I understand. One lady from the Attorney General's office told you that your case was not that important.
Was not important.
But then someone else from the Attorney General's office?
In the same day.
Same day.
Because when she said it wasn't important, I said, I need my black bonder back. And I was going to go a different route. Which route that was, I don't know.
Okay, so someone then from the Attorney General's office contacted you, and now they've taken up the case.
Yes.
And your son, Seth, is aligned in the case with Kyle.
Yes.
And that is an ongoing investigation at this point.
Yes.
Okay. And did you receive information from the Attorney General's office specifically so that you know that your son is aligned with that case? Is it
like not an
you
email?
just found out on the phone, or did they?
The investigator, John Rogers, had told me that there is a case now. I don't have a number. I don't have anything.
We'll find that out. And you say that's been about 8 months.
Yes, it started in March.
Okay.
So also,
But let me cut in. But since that, 6 other people have passed away at the same facility while this investigation is going on?
yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
that's the 6 that we know about.
And that would be in the year of 22? You were saying this is current? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And your son now is not there.
Right.
Is he having another provider?
He's he lives in the home with his father.
Okay.
So
you have you do still have some kind of care provided for him through the state?
his father does. I think it's I don't know. I know it changes after they turn 21.
As far as you know,
Yeah.
that care is sufficient at
Yes.
this point?
Yes.
Okay, all right. We'll get the reports and move forward on that. Thank you so much for being here today.
Representative Bacala?
Yes, I know we have Ms. Sharon Jackson here with LDH, who's in charge of Adult Protective Services. If she wouldn't mind coming to the table for just a moment, please.
And after that, we'll get Ms. Susan Rayborn to speak as well. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good morning.
I think just
introduce yourself.
Good morning. My name is Sharon Jackson. I am the State Director for Adult Protective Services, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the program.
Yes, ma'am. Ms. Jackson, I really don't want to ask any questions. I know you've listened attentively, and I think you've been taking a few notes in the back. And as we spoke about earlier, maybe for the next meeting, I just wanted to put on the record, can you, if you came back, and I'm not talking about any of these specific cases necessarily, even though we might go down that path, but generally speaking, I think it would be valuable to us to understand the process and the expectations and what you guys can do or can't do. And I don't know the answers to any of those questions, but I think I'd like to get that on the record. If you can be prepared, just to kind of all things Adult Protective Services at our next meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
And for the Boyce facility, you all have people that go and inspect these facilities, correct?
So I need to provide just a bit of clarification in terms of our service delivery system. Adult Protective Services investigates reports involving community investigations. Our health standards section is more appropriate to discuss those facility investigations. We have a separate units for those. We have a health standards is our unit for that type of investigation.
But you're in charge of both, like you're
Sir.
you're just over one section. Gotcha.
Yes, sir, and we investigate in the community, and it's most often family members, not a licensed provider.
Gotcha.
So it becomes a bit confusing because the reports received for health standards are received at our 800 number for APS, and so we receive that information, and those reports are sent to health standards for investigation. So the community may often say Adult Protective Services, but our role in that type of work is very limited to intake.
So you get a report and you send it to
Health Standards.
Health
Yes, sir.
Standards, and I'm assuming you would be Health Standards.
Yes, Tashika Dukes, Director for Health Standards. I have with me Cullen Brewer, who is our manager for our non-long-term care. We are familiar with some of these cases that have been mentioned today. We probably will need more time to prepare an answer to talk about it. But as far as the complaint process goes, we are, I guess we're in these facilities. For ICFs, I think we're in the facilities annually, 9 to 15 months. So we're.
When you say 9 to 15 months, you go in one time in a 9 to 15-month period?
Yes,
Okay.
we try to. If there's a complaint, we're in there sooner. So we take every complaint seriously. Familiar with the Kyle case, and we received emails from Kathy on that case, several emails, and they were all followed up on. And that case is currently with the Attorney General's office, just as they said.
For the next meeting, can you bring or provide whatever logs you all have of how many times you've visited this Boyce?
Absolutely.
In Boyce?
Yes.
That'd be pretty helpful to have. Hold on. Representative Bacala, you finished?
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Representative Wheat?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, speaking to the structure of protective services across all scopes, so I understand that there's a child protective services, adult protective services, elderly protective service. Now I'm hearing that we have the health inspection side of that. We're talking about facilities. Is there any other protective services that we need to know about here so we can get a full scope of who's doing what?
That's pretty inclusive, especially for LDH. We're going to have health standards for those provider and facility investigations, and adult protective services for community investigations.
And how big is your staff on the adult side?
I have 36 team members for the state of Louisiana.
And what about the health inspection side?
I think we have around 230 employees.
230.
Health standards, with probably just under 120 of those being surveyors or investigators.
And on the health side, you're inspecting facilities for both the child, adult, for all aspects of that?
Any facility complaint, any licensed or certified facility, we're licensing and certifying all licensed and certified facilities in the state. And if we receive a complaint under our jurisdiction, we go in and investigate those complaints.
So I'd just like to hear you respond to what was mentioned maybe as a solution-based idea at this point of consolidating services when money seems to be at the root of all issues when it comes to funding the things that we need to fund. How would you respond to that from the adult, the child, the elderly, and the health inspection services if that were somehow managed under one roof?
Not speaking for adult protection services, but we have certain requirements we have to meet for CMS. So those are our guidelines, and I wouldn't be able to speak on that. But I would be able to tell you that we're in communications with all of these offices on a continuous basis. If our programs cross if the complaint crossed the other's path, we're in constant communication, and we do kind of try to collaborate our visits and go out on the same time and share information. So we're in constant communication. That collaboration is there.
So maybe I see your side with the health inspections as being a little bit different. You're inspecting buildings, facilities, and that type of thing. On the other three aspects, child, adult, and elderly, we're inspecting complaints that involve people, whether they're 21 or older than 21. Is there some idea of consolidating that under roof in the effort of saving money and improving upon the people we get to do those things? Is that, I mean, I just trying to get your thoughts on that.
So just to provide a bit of history, for Adult Protective Services, in 2012, our services provided to adults were consolidated. We in fact had one program for Adult Protective Services and EPS at that time. Through decisions a little bit higher than my level, in 17, our programs were separated. Services for the elderly were returned to the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs. So we have a bit of experience with the combined Adult Protective Services system, and having directed both at that time, I thought that it did, and our quality reviews support that. But again, that's I suspect that's going to be a decision at your levels.
Yeah, no, I get that. I mean, can you give me maybe the idea of, is Louisiana, the way we're dividing it into three categories to protect our citizens in these fields, are we the same as other states? Are we different than other states? Or are we a model that works the best because it's been proven in other states that it works best?
So in other states, in most other states, services for adults and elders are joined. We are one of 4 states that does it differently. So it prevents challenges for our agency at times, and in particular, states have received ARPA funding.
So let me understand what you just said there. So you said in most states except for 4, am I reading that correct?
Sure.
Is that the adult and the elderly are classified together, and then you have a children protective services in the other?
Yes, sir.
And what's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think having directed both programs, I believe we're better joined. We spoke about having additional resources, being able to fill gaps, staffing resources. That's my professional opinion on it, and an opinion based on what the standards are across the nation.
Okay. Thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Senator Henskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Dukes, I guess this one's for you. Kind of walk me through what the structure is of how we do survey and inspect these facilities. Am I right? We, every 3 years, do a licensing survey?
For home community-based service providers, every 3 years we relicense. We do the relicensing survey. They are licensed annually. Surveys happen every 3 years. For ICFs, DDs, we're in there every 9 to 15 months. So
An annual inspection,
yeah.
more or less.
Yeah.
And whenever complaints come out.
And for any of those facilities, when a complaint comes out, we're in there investigating.
Now, kind of tell me what the survey is. We heard about licensing facility, but actually, are you going in there, checking the clients, checking the charts to see if the health care is being matched, or are you just surveying a facility?
Wherever the investigation leads us, that's where we look. That can be in charts, that can be talking with patients, family members, staff, anywhere, any place the investigation leads us. Sometimes outside of the facility. That's where we're investigating.
And when you find deficient practice, what do you do?
Well, we create a report that is sent up to CMS, and then sanctions are given for whatever how heavy the tag is, however.
And if they don't clear the deficient practices that y'all find, is there a license problem? What can y'all do?
There's no option not to clear. So we have to receive an acceptable plan. If there's no acceptable plan for clearing the deficiency, then they remain in noncompliance, and yes, license can be revoked at that time.
Okay. That's it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Bacala?
Real quick, as per Representative Wheat's question, Ms. Jackson, and you're speaking to the elderly and adult sections being separate, is that, I don't know why, is it a statute or is it internal policy? Why are y'all separate?
Well, according to our state statute, our Adult Protective Services Act, there's language there for the separate programs, services. In the statute, it defines the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs as the Protective Services Agency for adults 60 and older. And conversely, for adults 18 to 59, it's LDH. So we, during that period I mentioned, and just, I believe, just the administrative decisions, they were combined. And I believe that we were better supported.
Okay, I'm going back. Are y'all separate because of statute or because of policy?
I would have to say policy and statute at this time.
Okay, well, statute.
Barely statute. It's separate in statute.
Okay, that's what I got. Thank you.
So you're separate now, correct? And how long, Ms. Jack, how long have you been in this field?
I counted the other day. I think I'm right at 27 years. I started as an intern in this work and kind of progressed up the ladder.
So your institutional knowledge would dictate that we should go back to the way it was because you believe with your 20 years of experience that that's the best way to serve the people of Louisiana, correct?
That is my opinion, yes.
Okay, no, it's good. That's why I'm asking. I mean, you got 27 years of experience doing it, so I'd rather take your opinion than, I mean, nothing against my colleagues, but I promise you nobody's been doing any of this for 27 years. So we need to go with people that have experience, which, you know, so if that seems to be the path we need to take, we'll, I would imagine by the time this conversation is done, we'll be exploring that.
It impacts funding. I kind of hinted at the ARPA funding that was released. Through ACL, the Administration on Community Living, each state received funding in that regard. Here in Louisiana, because we have two programs, funding went to the Governor's Office of Elderly Affairs. So things like that make it difficult for our state sometimes, receiving the federal attention when we have a bifurcated system.
Well, we're going to try to fix that. President Bacala, you done?
Yeah, no, so if we combine it, should we combine it within LDH or within the Governor's office? Or within the Governor's office?
LDH.
LDH. And I say that because we have history and we have we've given it a try there and we've found that it worked, and we have services at LDH that support our mediation of abuse and neglect. We have our waiver programs. We have so many other programs, OBH services, that we can easily and quickly access by having the services there.
Gotcha. All right, the board is clear. Thank you all. I can assure you we'll see you all again.
Thank you.
All right, now we will switch to the presentation on local pharmacies. Mr. Randall. Oh, do I have one more? Oh, I'm sorry. I do. Susan Rayburn, then Randall. I apologize, Miss Rayburn.
Hello, how are you all?
Yes, ma'am, if you could introduce yourself.
Susan Rayburn. I just happened on this meeting, but I thought it was quite interesting that I did. I have a friend, a gal that I know, and she was looking for a job, and she went to get a job and got the job at a place called Harmony Center. That's a group home where there's disabled people. There's even some juvenile prisoners at the same place with adults. And she quit after, I believe she was out there for only 2 days. The conditions were absolutely deplorable. She said there was feces all over the floor. You couldn't even hardly work there because of the stench. Flies everywhere, flies on the people, unchanged diapers on people. And she said the younger kids that were minors, a couple of them asked to speak to their parent, that they had been denied any ability to speak to their parent. And she overheard some of the workers telling them, your mother dumped you off here. Your father dumped you off here. Nobody wants to talk to you. Keep that phone. And they were not allowed to allow these people to have any phone call. They were hiding the phones from the ones that could have the phone. And she said she quit because to stay there, she said, all these people are going to go to jail, surely. She said, I can't even believe what I saw. They were doing drug deals outside of this Harmony Center at 12 midnight. They were all high. They were packing, some of the workers there packing guns at this place, not the security guards, people that were doing it, just people that were meeting people for the drug deals. She said it was so horrific, the place needs to be closed down immediately, and the abuse that they would hit if anyone tried to get up out of the bed, they would literally sock them. Some of them, they'd go get one of the men to sock them and say, stay down, stay, even when they were allowed to get up. It was the most horrific thing that I have ever heard, and I tried to help her as an, call the DHS, but what's that going to get you? Nowhere. Make a complaint. What's that going to do? Nothing. You're paying people $9 an hour. What kind of people are you going to get to come work for you? Nothing. I mean, the whole thing is just an ever-living hellhole of abuse with these people. And I'm sure this isn't the only place, because I've heard it at other places. And I don't know what we can do with our Department of Elderly Services. They sure weren't any help to me with my own father and dealing with them. Do they ever really do much of anything? It is so frustrating. And something has got to change, because we're living in a society that wants to get rid of the elderly, get rid of the babies, and get rid of anybody that's in a wheelchair, or like, what kind of society is that? And so there's got to be some way to reorganize money and funds to be able to take care of the most vulnerable in our society, in our state. So that's what.
Okay, I'll get, when they provide us with Boyce, I'll get them to provide us with Harmony as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Okay, now we are finished, I believe. Let me get Randall with the presentation on local pharmacies.
Mr. Chairman and members, thank you very much for gathering here and giving us the opportunity to come and give you a brief presentation on local pharmacies in Louisiana. My name is Randall Johnson. I work for the Louisiana Independent Pharmacies Association. And I think that you have a little packet of information in front of you that I just wanted to share to make certain that you have an opportunity to look at some of the things we're talking about. We'll leave that information with you, but I wanted to thank you for the attention that you've always given the pharmacies they have. The pharmacies themselves find themselves as the most accessible healthcare provider. They find themselves in somewhat that appears to be a retail setting where a patient is able to walk in and speak to that pharmacist with no appointment necessary. About half of our pharmacies in the state that are retail pharmacies or small business independents, about half are chain drug stores, including those who are in grocery stores and big box locations. We've had the opportunity to put together a map for you to just give you an idea about that as we look. And I think that if you look at that map, then we've got one that shows you a lot of blue dots that are pretty predominant. You don't have the handout? Sorry about that.
Thank you.
So our state is, as we look for healthcare providers there, that we find that pharmacists are very prominent in that. We wanted to talk today a little bit about the Medicaid program, and I know there's some folks from the Medicaid program that are in here offering themselves if they would like to have any questions. You'd like to have any questions. But our Medicaid program is something that serves nearly 2 million people in our state. In that Medicaid program, that there's about 20 million prescriptions that are filled each year. In fact, the pharmacists find themselves processing about 27 million prescriptions for the Medicaid population, but they have the opportunity to work through different issues and concerns that appropriately dispense about 20 million prescriptions a year for the Medicaid population. That program costs right at $2 billion gross and draws in about $1 billion in rebates. That information's in there for you. It's supplied by the department. We've worked with the department for a number of years, and including back in 2010 and 11, we were able to work with the Department of Health and offer some cost savings there. The department made some changes there in 2019 related to pharmacy reimbursement. And the way our pharmacy program is done is it's a cost-based reimbursement. It's two pieces, both the ingredient cost and the dispensing fee. We think that's a very successful way to look at that. And in fact, we had a good meeting at the department last week with a council that you created to talk about Medicaid pharmacy reimbursement. They have the experts that they've contracted to bring in, and we spent a day talking about the way they produce those costs for both the dispensing fee and the ingredient cost. We may continue to talk about that. That'll be a report, I believe, that'll be coming to the legislature as you convene next year. But the opportunities that we look at with our pharmacy program are significant. You've got 5 MCOs, soon to be 6 MCOs, and then also the fee-for-service program. And we do look at coming with January 1. Medicaid has gone through a Medicaid pharmacy re-enrollment and a pharmacist re-enrollment. So we look at the opportunities to continue to serve that population out there. One thing that is interesting is we look at the way that we have had transparency in the Medicaid pharmacy program has given us the opportunity to look that $2 billion in expenditures brings in about $1 billion in rebate, just rounding that up. Comparing that to the Office of Group Benefits, what we have there is that's providing the care for about 200,000 people, or about 10% of the Medicaid population. And in that program, they're planning to spend about $500 million a year. That includes that the state employees, their dependents, and retirees have a copay that exists in that program, where the Medicaid program has a limited copay, and while that copay has been set aside through the public health emergency, then we are looking, and I think I provided you with some information there on the page that says pharmacy benefits comparison, just to make certain you're all so focused and so knowledgeable on the different things that are happening. But if we compared the successes of our Medicaid program, then we will see that the gross cost of the Medicaid program is running out pre-rebates at about $1,179 per member per year for prescription. If we do that net of rebates, then that's $581 per member per year for prescription drug services. If we compare that to the group benefits program, then we're seeing that's costing a little over $2,000 per member per year for prescription drug services. I mention that because as you talk about your variety of roles where it comes to Medicaid, which substantially is a payment process that we have, we also look at the cost that you have to deal with as state employees, as state officials, as dependents or retirees of state government, and look at the increasing cost of health care. So our Medicaid program has in some manner been substantially successful in reining in the cost of prescription drug services. And we think that the lessons that Medicaid may have been able to look at and work together with the providers in order to put in place are some lessons that our state broadly could look at when it comes to the Office of Group Benefits, and some savings available there.
Representative Edmonds for a question.
So in looking at the sheet 1 that's on our presentation that you're giving us, so Medicaid found some kind of way to keep this at $581.46. That's in the middle of the page. And you're saying that the significant difference between that and what they have learned in comparison would be over $2,000 for the OGB that we're now under contract that's in debate right now.
Yes, sir.
And you think those numbers are accurate?
Well, the numbers that are for the Medicaid program come from the Medicaid program and come from the documents that they've produced. And the numbers from OGB come from the presentation that OGB made to the Joint Legislative Committee on the Budget.
It's odd that in a lot of other Medicaid services, we don't see a variance in our favor like this one. This is an odd number that OGB would be that high on this contract in comparison to is there any idea of how Medicaid services have been successful to keep the number at that kind of level?
I think that what we've had is substantially there are some rebates that are out there for the manufacturers, but most particularly the Medicaid program historically has worked with the providers in order to be able to design a program, because these pharmacists that are out there, they're taxpayers also. They're sitting there in their store keeping their doors open, and so Medicaid has gone to a cost reimbursement methodology, and we're looking for what the cost of the drugs are. We're evaluating what the cost of that pharmacy providing the service is. And we suggest that the transparency that the Medicaid program has seen would benefit the state having that transparency in other matters also.
Yep. So you're talking about our independent pharmacies.
Yes, sir.
Across the board, across the whole state, right?
Yes, sir.
And they've worked out these rates and reimbursements to try to get it and keep it to that level.
Yes, sir. And this impacts all pharmacies.
Yeah.
It's not just independents. The independents get a little bit more focused because the big chains may have a national contract that they work across the nation on. The independents are looking at what happens in our own state and focused working with Medicaid on that. So what we've done has, while it's something that the independents have embraced, it's something that the chain drugstores have supported also.
Yeah, and so for the figures that you're giving, this is, the Medicaid program is a lot larger than OGB. It would seem it just seems reasonable that, and again, I'm not asking you to ask outside of your reference that you've had, but to your experience, has the administration looked with independents and others to try to model a similar program to make this work?
I don't think we've gotten to that point yet. I believe we're still looking at a model and a design that may be decades old. There are some new opportunities that the state has looked at. In fact, you in the legislature passed 2 years ago, I believe, what they talk about is the caption was a reverse auction. And I believe that what you looked at there was bringing transparency to this prescription drug process. There are a number of states that had done it, Maryland, New Jersey, and a bipartisan activity with both Chris Christie as governor, as a Republican, and a Democratic leader of the Senate. We saw some things that are going on in a number of different states in West Virginia that moved their state employees program into patterning the Medicaid program for that. And it offers substantial savings by getting that transparency. With what you passed in the legislature, with the reverse auction, gives you an opportunity to establish the guidelines on what you're looking for and vet the companies that want to bid on that, and then open up on a particular day and design that those companies can bid, and who can do that, what qualified bidders can do that for the state and its employees at the lowest possible cost.
Do you have a sort of sheet of explanation of some of these things that we could have for joint budget on Friday? Because I'm sure we're coming right back to this discussion, and obviously it's very interesting at 500 to 2,000. This is something very interesting to us. We could receive great service at that much less money. I mean, do you have, and I hate to say bullet points, but I mean, what do you have that you could provide for us for joint budget?
Well, I think that this information right here could be of benefit to you, sir. I mean, I think we put this in a design that, whether we're talking about Medicaid or whether we're talking about the state employees, we're talking about people's health. I don't think that our Medicaid population is so substantially different than the rest of the people in the state. It just goes to an income level. You know, it could be something that because of the income level or because of the healthcare conditions, any of us could be impacted by.
If you have any other description of how Medicaid has done this that you could provide for me, I would like to have it so that we could have. I use this as well.
Yes, sir.
For Friday's meeting, because we're in a serious move of trying to look at a contract, as you well know now, and this seems like some great information that might help our state.
Yes, sir. Well, thank you very much. We will work to put the information together for you.
Thank you.
Bacala? Yeah, thank you. Just trying, and again, I think that there's some validity to the fact. I mean, 500 to 2,000, the 3.5 times. I do want to just mention this, that the populations are not the same for a couple reasons. Number one, I think if you look at, I think in the industry they call it the census, and the younger you are, the cheaper you are. right? I mean, kids don't have renal failure and the things that are very expensive. So that's one aspect that creates some disparity between the two. I think the other thing that creates some disparity is the oldest of the population is what costs the most in pharmacy. And within the Medicaid population, most of the elderly are dual enrolled, so they're enrolled in Medicaid, but Medicare takes care of their prescription drug costs. So there is something of a disparity when you try to look across both. And I'm for your point, but I'm also want to be clear that it's a little bit more difficult just to count heads. You have to have a complete census, I think, to make an accurate crossover between the two. But at the same time, I'm looking for a better way than what we've had before in OGB. And I know that one of the big issues is, the independents not being reimbursed even at their cost. And the nationwide, I think some of the most profitable companies in the world are PBMs, and we ultimately pay it. And I really don't get the whole rebate thing. We're going to pay you too much so you can give us some back. Anyway, I just wanted to call attention to the fact that there is some differences between the Medicaid population and the OGB population. I don't even know if they count PBM per member membership the same. I know different places. In some places, a member is one person and their family, so there may be a head count difference. I don't know that exists either, but I know that there's a per member per month may be a member plus dependents, or it may be everybody. And I know different people do that differently, and I know this from my prior world. So anyway, I think we need to dig into it more. I know that you've seen probably everybody in this room who sits on that joint budget turn away this latest contract more than once because we think we're getting screwed, quite frankly. But anyway, and the local pharmacies are even getting worse. So anyway, that's it.
Well, Representative Bakala, just to mention a couple of quick points. One, if we look at those numbers, members with pharmacy benefits in that line there, then what we have is there's about 2 million members, just under 2 million members of the Medicaid program. There's 1.6 members that received pharmacy benefits. So you end up with 300,000 that didn't receive a pharmacy benefit. Okay. Likewise, when you look at OGB, there's a little over 225,000 members of OGB. There's 198,000 of those that received a pharmacy benefit. So we did look at that. And while there is a lot of children, a great number of children in the Medicaid population, there are also folks that are very, very ill in the Medicaid population and have very high cost of care. I was a state employee for a generation, and as I got older, I did not retire from the state because I left before I retired. But there seems to be somewhat a rule of thumb that as you get older, you take a prescription drug for every decade of your life. So I'm about even on that right now, and I will tell you that because I have Blue Cross Blue Shield and I have an HSA, a private policy where I have to pay my cost of drugs, my prescriptions, and I'm currently, because of the injury to my back, I'm taking 5 prescriptions. That is what I regularly get filled, and it's under $20 per month for me to get all 5 of those prescriptions filled. Using the PBM, if I were a state employee, there would be an average of $85 per prescription that that the state would be paying for each of those prescriptions. So there's a lot of difference there that when we look at these costs, using these contracts that we've seen, my Lipitor, my generic Lipitor, which is $4 for a 90-day fill, the state would be paying, if I were a state employee, more than $112 for that same 90-day fill. So the transparency, I know that you folks are all experienced in looking at what things cost and looking at where costs are hitting. The transparency that we have with prescription drug pricing is important for you to be able to see.
And listen, I think probably what we need to do, if we're going to compare the two plans, we need a complete census breakdown so we can get a better idea of whether they are equal or not as far, I mean, can we count person per person? But there I can't imagine why there isn't the opportunity to actually compare that census data between Medicaid and Medicare to add validity to the numbers that you're giving us.
I think that, you know, we've attempted to get that to work with them at the Office of Group Benefits.
Them who?
I think it's the opportunity is probably for you to ask your legislative auditor to be able to work on this for you.
Well, you said ask them. Who's them?
At the Office of Group Benefits. We've asked for information, and they've substantially told us that their consultant, Buck, does this for them, and they don't need anyone else involved. And just one thing I will mention, you know, as we've seen, we believe that what is occurring is market standards. Well, if we have 3 large PBMs that are together more than 85% of the marketplace, then that sets the market standard. That doesn't mean it's right. And our pharmacies aren't against PBMs. They are a necessary part that we are working with. We understand it. In fact, in the Medicaid program alone, we already work with 5 different PBMs. So it's not something that the pharmacists aren't familiar with.
Well, the census data is going to be used for the bid. I mean, so I can't imagine that it didn't. I don't know if it's a public record or non-public record, but obviously no company in the world is going to bid a ceiling if you don't understand who the population is, how, you know, what their prescription drug history is, all that stuff. I mean, so it's got to be there. And well, I don't know. Okay, I know we're getting away from Medicaid, so I'll stop it there.
Thank you so much.
All right, the board is clear. Thank you. All right, members, I'm going to meet with you afterwards. Members, the board is clear. Representative Edmonds moves that we adjourn. Any objections? No objections. Thank you.